My name is Ron, I'm 26, and I'm married to Stacy, who's 24. Halloween is one of our favorite holidays, and this year Stacy and I decided to go all out and throw an epic Halloween party at our house. We'd been in planning mode for weeks, figuring out decorations, costumes, food, and making sure every little detail was perfect. We even decided to invite both of our families and some of our closest friends, knowing that spending Halloween night with everyone would make it that much more special. One of the first people I invited was my twin brother, John. He's the kind of guy who always brings energy and excitement to any event, and we've been close since birth, almost always in sync with each other. John and I may be identical twins, but his personality is much more extroverted than mine. He has this wild streak. He's always out to have a good time, and people tend to gravitate toward him. I wasn't surprised when Stacy seemed excited to see him. They always got along well. With the guest list ready, Stacy and I focused on making the house as creepy as possible. Stacy took charge of the decorations, hanging cobwebs in every corner, scattering plastic spiders, and even installing fake tombstones along the path leading to our front door. Inside, we hung orange and purple lights, placed creepy skeletons in the corners, and added a few motion-activated ghostly figures that would scream or giggle when someone walked by. I picked out our costumes, settling on something classic. I would be a vampire, and Stacy was going to be a witch with a little twist. Her costume was a sleek black dress with a high slit, smoky eye makeup, and a hat that added a touch of mystery. When she tried it on, I had to admit, she looked amazing. She had definitely put some thought into it, and it showed. She teased me, saying, "Don't get distracted, Ron. It's for the party, remember?" Finally, the night of the party arrived, and I could already feel the excitement building as people started arriving. My dad showed up dressed as Frankenstein, and he didn't just dress the part. He walked with a lumbering gait that made everyone laugh. My cousin Karen showed up dressed as a mad scientist, with flasks of colorful, mystery potions that were really just fancy cocktails that she kept passing around. The air was filled with laughter, music, and that special Halloween magic you can't quite describe. John, naturally, made a grand entrance. He was dressed as a werewolf, with fake fur and claws and a mask that even had these animatronic eyes that lit up. When he walked in, the whole room erupted in cheers and laughter. Stacy ran up to him, pretending to be scared, and they did this little act together, hiding behind him while John did his best roar. It was funny to see them like that, just enjoying the Halloween spirit, playing along with the crowd. As the party went on, the party got more and more lively. Stacy and I took turns leading the party, mingling with the different groups, making sure everyone had a drink in their hand, and generally just enjoying ourselves. Every now and then, I'd catch Stacy and John talking in the corner, laughing about something or exchanging quick jokes. But I didn't think much of it. They were always friendly and everyone got along great. The music was pumping and the set and fog machine added just the right amount of creepiness to the atmosphere. Around 10 p.m., someone suggested a costume contest, and naturally everyone pushed John and Stacy to go head-to-head. I joined in the fun, cheering on Stacy as she played out her witchy role, giggling and casting fake spells on everyone. John responded by letting out a convincing howl and rushing towards her, playing his big, bad werewolf role to perfection. Stacy theatrically pretended to faint, and the whole room erupted in laughter. Later, while I was in the kitchen refilling drinks and setting out snacks, I noticed Stacy's phone had lit up on the counter with a message. I didn't think much of it at first, but seeing John's name on the screen caught my attention. It was just a quick, "Need anything?" which seemed innocent enough to me. But it was late, and I wondered why he was texting her when they were both at the same party. Then again, maybe he was just being a considerate guest, making sure everything was ready. As things began to die down, most people had left by midnight, and only a few of us were left sitting around the living room swapping funny Halloween stories. Stacy and I were feeling a little tired after the day, so we started helping clean up a bit. John offered to stay and help us, which was nice. Later that evening, I had to make a quick run to the store. The Halloween party was almost over, and I figured I'd be back before Stacy or anyone else noticed I was gone. The run to the store was quicker than I expected, maybe 20 minutes tops. But when I pulled into the driveway, something was wrong. The house was strangely quiet, too quiet. I walked into the living room to see a handful of guests hunched over the dining room table, mumbling barely coherent stories, their eyes heavy with sleep. None of them seemed to know where Stacy or John were. I walked through the house, peered into the kitchen, and checked every room, but none of them were in sight. That's when I thought to check upstairs to see if they'd gone to get blankets for our tipsy friends who were staying the night. But as I climbed the stairs, an inexplicable feeling of dread began to wash over me, growing heavier with each step. When I reached the top of the stairs, I hesitated outside our bedroom door. A strange feeling tugged at me to open it, but nothing could have prepared me for what I would find inside. I pushed the door open, and in the dim light coming in from the hallway, I saw them, Stacy and John, together in our bed. The scene was a blur of tangled sheets, scattered clothes, and two people I trusted all wrapped up in each other. They hadn't even heard me come in. My brother, my own twin, in bed with my wife. A look of shock and horror crossed Stacy's face as she spotted me standing in the doorway. She pulled the sheet over herself, and John fumbled, trying to grab his clothes, all the color drained from his face. But that was just the beginning of a twisted, intriguing story. I turned and walked out, feeling the weight of what I had just witnessed sink in with every step. In the days that followed, Stacy insisted it had been nothing more than a mistake, a drunken lapse in judgment. She claimed she had genuinely thought John was me, that they had both been drinking, and that she hadn't realized her mistake until it was too late. But her words felt hollow, like a pathetic excuse to cover up the damage. John, unable to meet my eyes, admitted he'd thought it would be a funny joke, a bit of harmless fun that had gone horribly wrong. He'd even gone so far as to wear the suit I'd left in my closet to impersonate me. It had been a twisted, cruel trick, and the betrayal left me feeling empty and raw. Stacy begged for forgiveness, begging me to believe that it really was an accident and that she hadn't done anything deliberately to hurt me. She even went so far as to offer to take a polygraph test, wanting to prove that she was telling the truth. After days of agonizing indecision, I agreed. The test results showed that she was honest, that she had truly been confused in her drunken state and had not willingly betrayed me. But the relief of her honesty did nothing to numb the pain. Stacy promised over and over that she would make things right, that we would rebuild the trust that had been broken. But every time I looked at her, the image of her and John together filled my mind. While Stacy and I debated what to do next, I cut off all communication with John. The thought of even talking to him seemed unbearable. Now the line was drawn. Stacy, desperate to rebuild what was left of our marriage, and John, forever severed from the bond we once shared as twins. And though Stacy had proven her honesty, the question remained in the back of my mind, eating away at any attempt to forgive. Would I ever be able to look at her and not remember? In the weeks that followed, Stacy tried to prove to everyone that she wanted to make things right. She seemed genuinely remorseful, constantly asking how I was doing and assuring me it would never happen again. But no matter how hard she tried, the damage seemed irreversible. As for John, he didn't reach out. There was no apology, no attempt to smooth things over, nothing. He seemed to have accepted that our relationship was broken and moved on without a fight. In a way, that made it easier, but it also hurt to know that he hadn't even tried to make things right. My own twin had betrayed me, and now it felt like I was losing both him and my wife in one swift, brutal blow. I threw myself into work, staying late at the office. I told Stacy I had deadlines or extra projects, but the truth was, I couldn't bear to go home. One night, as I sat in my office well past midnight, Stacy texted me that we needed to talk. At first I ignored it, but she kept texting, each message more urgent than the last. Finally, I sighed and drove home, exhausted and ready for another round of half-hearted conversation. When I arrived, she was waiting at the kitchen table, clearly nervous, her fingers fiddling with the hem of her sweater. "Ron, I know this has been hell for you. I hate what I did to you," she said quietly, looking at me with teary eyes. "But I don't want to lose you. I don't want this to haunt us forever." I was about to brush her off, but she surprised me. She had arranged for us to go to couples counseling. It was her last attempt to salvage what we could. She had already signed up for the sessions, and I could see in her eyes that she was desperate. Despite my reluctance, I agreed. At least, I thought it might give me some closure. The session started awkwardly. Our therapist, Dr. Lyle, was calm and humble, encouraging us to talk openly and without judgment. At first, I wasn't sure what to say, how to even begin to explain the wreckage left behind from that night. But Dr. Lyle had a way of gently drawing words out of us, and gradually I began to talk about betrayal, anger, and confusion. For her part, Stacy admitted that this had been a colossal mistake. She kept saying how sorry she was that she'd been so drunk that she truly believed it was me, and that she'd never forgive herself for hurting me like that. Hearing her repeat the story didn't make it any easier, but with each session, I felt myself opening up a little, enough to explore my anger instead of letting it eat away at me in silence. One day, about a month into therapy, Dr. Lyle suggested something I hadn't thought of. "Ron, maybe it would be good for you to meet John, to hear his side of the story and bring him closure, no matter what that means for you." At first, the idea repulsed me. I didn't want to see him, let alone hear his pathetic excuses. But as the days went by, I realized that the wound John had left might never heal if I continued to avoid her. So after another 2 weeks of struggling with the decision, I finally called John. He picked up on the second ring, sounding surprised but cautiously optimistic. We agreed to meet in a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown, away from home and the memories that haunted him. When I walked in, he was already sitting, nervously wringing his hands. I barely recognized him. He looked pale, almost haggard, as if he had aged years in the past few weeks. But as I sat down, I held my emotions in check, determined to keep the conversation civil, at least for now. He began to speak before I could say anything, his words coming out in a quiet, remorseful confession. "Ron, I was an idiot," he said, his voice low. I thought it would be funny, a stupid joke, but it got out of hand, and I didn't know how to stop it once it started. I was selfish, and I know I screwed it up." Hearing him finally take responsibility gave me a strange mix of relief and anger. I could feel my hands clenching, my anger boiling, but I forced myself to remain calm. "You didn't just screw it up, John. You destroyed every shred of trust one ever had in you. We were supposed to be a family." My voice was firmer than I'd expected, but the betrayal still stung, and I wasn't holding back. John nodded, clearly shaken, and admitted that he'd been struggling with his own guilt ever since. He even tried to leave the city to start all over again, but he couldn't bring himself to leave without clearing things up with me. He apologized again, admitting that he'd been drinking too much and that it wasn't an excuse for what he'd done. But he wanted to do whatever it took to make things right, even if it meant never seeing me again. I left that day feeling numb. He'd apologized, sure, but the wound was still there, and I wasn't sure an apology could ever truly heal it. But facing him was a step, and as painful as it was, it gave me a sense of relief that maybe, just maybe, I could move forward. At home, things were different between Stacy and me. Not healed, not quite as planned, but different. Therapy continued, and we slowly moved forward, but the ghost of that night still lingered. Months passed, and I tried to accept that healing would take time. Around spring, Stacy approached me one evening with a quiet proposition. She suggested selling the house and moving somewhere new, somewhere where we could start over, without reminders of that night in every room. She was right, and while the thought of leaving was painful, it also offered a strange kind of hope. So we sold the house. We packed up, moved to a new place, and tried as best we could to put the past behind us. The road to healing was slow, but I found a strange comfort in new beginnings. We still went through therapy, there were still hard days, but we were slowly learning to live again, one day at a time. And maybe that was enough.